Hey everyone, Mike here. So I'm going to re-record the live lecture that I just did. It did not record, and I wanted to make sure to get this to everybody who was um, unable to attend the live critique tonight. So if my voice is a little raspy, it's because I just did this and I'm starting to lose it. So hopefully I can keep it together throughout this entire one. So a few announcements before we get started. The first of which is that the lighting challenge that is going on for this month, we've extended the deadline, and the deadline will now be May 31st. So you will have the next a little bit more than a month and a half to get your new sci-fi scene up and running. Again, every Friday I'll be doing these live critiques, and so you can post your work and get some feedback there. Also, we have a new course that's coming out. We don't have a release date on it yet, but it's a Octane rendering workshop that's going to be conducted by Matt Wilson. If you want to know a little bit more about Matt, I interviewed him this past Wednesday. It's on the Facebook Live down below. It is also posted on our YouTube channel. You can find us at the Academy of Animated Art or Academy of Animated Art on YouTube. There you'll find all of our interviews, all of our past critiques, all of our student work, demo reel reviews, all that good stuff. Let's see. Additionally, Jasmine's going to be doing some trailer breakdowns for you guys, so we'll have those in the next coming weeks. And then the upcoming schedule for next week. So next Monday, I'll show you guys some tips and tricks on Monday night at 9 p.m. On Wednesday, we're going to be interviewing Sarah Tarr, who is our modeler for all of these assets, for the Bladerunner scene, the mushroom and the girl. Basically every lighting challenge that we've done, or most of them, have been created by Sarah Tarr. So we just want to talk to her about her process. And then on Friday, we're going to be doing another live critique. So without much further ado, I want to start by answering a couple of questions that came up during the live version of this. So the first one, I'm going to answer two. So the first question is, it was a question about render layers for characters. Like how many render layers, which render layers should you use? The second question is specifically about the Blade Runner scene and the best way to approach it, or the sci-fi city scene and the best way to approach it. So in terms of character lighting, I don't ever say that there's a set number of render layers that you should always have, or AOVs or anything like that. Just because every scene is different, every situation is unique. But that being said, I generally break out my diffuse, my specular, subsurface. I will do indirect and direct light. I always break out a Z pass if I want to do any depth of field work in the render. I think those are the type of render layers that the question was geared towards. But additionally, I always definitely like to render my character separate from the background. I know some people don't always like to do that, but for me, it just allows me to create some more depth of field effects, do some more color corrections in the comp, and really gain some more control. I always like to have a crypto mat or some Rgb passes. For the eyes, and these are just some personal preference, I generally will run an Rgb pass in the eye to get the pupil, sclera, and iris separate so I can control those colors and dial them a little bit in. I run the eye reflections separately normally. And then I always inevitably will try and dial in the look of the specularity on the hair of a character. So I will often run an extra hair spec pass to try and get some, especially in darker haired characters. I really want to like dial in the hair spec. So those are just some general render layers that I use. The next question before getting into the individual critiques for this week was talking about how to approach the Blade Runner scene. So and this was specifically for somebody who wanted to do a fly through. So the things that I want to focus on are, for starters, my A1 always, no matter what I'm lighting, is reference. I always want to generate reference or find reference, especially for a city. Is it daytime? Is it nighttime? If it's daytime, you want to see how the sunlight is shining in and hitting the windows and bouncing some caustic light onto the ground. I think that's a really cool thing. There's just so much depth and so much richness to city lighting during a daytime. So much going on that you can really play off of. So definitely look into some paintings, some photography. And if you live in an urban area, look at it through a window, because I don't want anybody going outside right now. Stay home, stay safe, everybody. If you're doing a nighttime scene, I highly recommend looking at some reference of the window colors. I'll talk about that here in a second. But once you kind of get your reference and get your overall color scheme, I know that in a lot of these films, like, you can find lots of reference of, and I'll show you this in one of the student examples from this week's image submissions, is how the saturation levels you could play up. So in kind of super sci-fi, super stylized, futuristic looking things, the colors are always very, very saturated. If you want it to be more realistic, you'd go a little bit desaturated with that. And so after you get the reference, I go ahead and place my camera. If you're doing a fly through, go ahead and mock it up without any lighting in there or without any super detail in there, because what you want to do is you want to place your camera so you want to definitely know where to focus everything. In terms of detail, so if you are moving your camera, make sure you do a quick test with motion blur to see how motion blur and how blurry things will get, because you don't want to add detail to things that are going to get motion blurred away. These buildings are lower poly, meant to be shot from a distance. So if you get up close to them, you may have to add some extra detail in the texture map themselves. And I'm about to talk about some window stuff. So you'll have to paint in some windows into the individual texture maps that way. And because we added some windows ourselves by default, but you can certainly make adjustments to that. So the last thing I'll talk about is some window lighting. So I'm going to take a second here. I'm probably going to edit this out and shut off some lights so I can show you out my window. Okay. So now I want to, hopefully you all can see this, but I want to show you, I'm going to step out of the way here. So basically I want to show you all out the window so that you can get a sense of the different values of color. You can see some cooler tones, some warmer tones. You can see little points of red light. That's like an exit sign in one of the windows over there. You can see just like a lot of variation. You can see a string of Christmas lights off to the side. You can see some detail. So this is what I'm talking about. So if your camera is locked off on a city for this long, what you're going to want to see is inside the windows a little bit. You're going to want to see those recessed lights. You're going to want to see the color change. You're going to want to see the Christmas lights. You're going to want to see the exit sign. Now, if you're flying through, you won't need to get down to that detail. But again, this isn't something that you have to like create geometry for or anything like that. You can just paint them into the texture map, and that would be totally sufficient. So it's just a matter of, like this is like you're looking at New York City right now. So New York is a very dynamic place. It's constantly moving. It's constantly changing. Lights are popping on. They're popping off. Ambulances are constantly going by. Fire trucks are constantly going by, flashing lights up on there. So you want to pay attention to the movement of the light, to the dynamicness of the light. Like sometimes some of these lights are televisions, so they'll be flickering on and off. And you want to make sure to pay attention to that in your scene as well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hop into the individual lighting challenge for now. These are the student images that we had for the week. I wanted to start by talking about the there's a couple different examples that I have here. There's work that was submitted for review and other stuff I just kind of want to generally show you guys. So this is one I just want to generally show you. This is Kleber's working on this for inside the student lighting area. So Kleber's one of our students, and I just kind of want to show you what he's up to and his reference to kind of talk you through your own city lighting stuff. So this is early stages of what he's working on. But you can start to see some of the reference that he pulled up. And these are kind of some of the things that I was talking about. Like let's take a look at this. So the difference between like a city like this with super saturated colors versus something like this stuff over here, which is a little bit more desaturated and a little bit more realistic. Those are going to, or like this is super saturated, right? That's going to really depend on how you light up your city. So just something that he's working on there that I thought was really cool. And I really like this kind of staging, because what you can do is you can really do a couple things here to get, because this is going to be our focus, is this character. A couple things that you can do. Number one, he can consider, like, she's obviously standing on top of a building. There are lights on top of buildings. He can do like a really direct upward light coming in underneath her, kind of shining up on her face here, kind of catching her hair, making that look really cool. Catching this blade, that could be really neat. The other thing is he could take this camera, swing it around this way, and then what we have is the complexity of the city, and then just kind of keep the character super simple and allowing the simplicity of the character to pop off from the background too. So just a couple opportunities there to really get some good character and background separation. So a couple of let's get into some submissions here. So the first one I want to start with is Naya. I'm going to take away some of the stuff I drew up earlier. So Naya did a really great job of including, so we've got this image. It looks nice out of the gate. It's got some really good potential. But when I looked at this, I was like, man, there's just like, this is a good start, but it's just not quite there yet. There's more that we can do. And thank goodness that you included some reference imagery, because again, this is the lifeblood of what we're doing. So we can really get a good sense of what's going on, and getting some guidance to really, really help us out. So I'm going to flip back and forth a lot here between the reference and his. So the first thing I noticed when I was looking at this, I was like, man, like something's not feeling right about this branch. It feels very flat to me. It feels very even, and it doesn't, like, it's just not really doing it for me yet. So let's go ahead and take a look at this reference. Okay, this is a little bit different. There's much more light on the top. It's more dynamic between the light and dark. The key to fill ratio is higher. Additionally, there's like pockets of light. So this is in shadow over here. This is in light over here. The shadow there, more light there. So a little bit more of a shadow variation. Now let's look at the render. Consistent across the top. Not a lot of variation in there. The shadow is just underneath the character. There's really no idea of direction in any sense. And there's no variation. There's no breakup. There's no shadow from anything else breaking it up. So you really want to push that, and definitely push the intensity a little bit more. That's being hit by the sunlight, man. We got to push it. We got to get it strong and really powerful. So, and then just like getting that difference between the top and bottom there would be really good. But then I really wanted to kind of zero in on the character itself. So looking at the character, this is a tricky one to light, specifically because if you just look at this region here, we've got like a black shape here, we have a white shape down here, and then we have a red shape right there, a super saturated red shape right there in the middle. Not an easy combination, right? But the one thing that I'm looking at is, like I said when I pointed out the shadow down here, is I don't get a good sense of where the light's coming from here. Like I see that this is very bright, which would indicate light's coming from this way. But then I see a little bit here, which indicates light's coming from this way. But then I see like some specular highlights here, which would indicate there's some more coming from that way too. So I don't really know. I don't really know where the key direction is here. Looking back at the reference, we can see there's a definite strong key angle. Definite key light coming in this way. You can see the shadow here. Like you can see the shadow coming in here, coming across here from the character. You can definitely feel that this side of his body is brighter than this side. Key light's definitely coming in from this side. I would really like to see that kind of definitive answer here. Allow this white to go a little bit darker. Like let's say the key light was coming in from back over here, right? You can get some rim up here on the super dark head, because one of the things that I'm looking at is like how dark that head gets, and there's like no variation in there in this render. We can get more variation in the blacks. Like you can see it in some of these areas here. More variations in the blacks than just that like pure black color. And the white fur, again, it's just getting too bright. Let's tone it down. It's a tricky balance. You can see it in here. Like that's a pretty good value. Maybe a little bit here when the key's hitting it. But you don't want to get it too dirty looking, but you definitely don't want it to be quite that bright, because that's just like blowing out, and there's no light source to really support that. Same thing back here. So these feathers, there's not a lot of shaping going on here. So just make sure that we're getting some variation in that. And then I always like with these like thin talon like fingers, I always like to create an extra ambient occlusion just to really ground the shadows in there, because it feels like it's a little bit floating on top. And then as far as the eye goes, we just want to get, like right now there's like 2 eye dings going on there. Really just want to solidify that and just make that 1 eye ding, because when you're doing animal lighting, it's very important to kind of get their eyes to look a little bit more humanoid. To kind of beautify them up to make sure that the audience can connect with that character. So the last thing I want to mention with this one is the depth of field. Now, overall, I think you're doing a really good job with the depth of field. The amount of blur feels about right. I feel like you're in the ballpark there. The problem, it's not a problem, but the thing that I'm seeing is that you're allowing for some space that's in focus behind the bird back over here. And if this was a human character sitting on a branch of a tree, I feel like that would be about right. But given the scale of this, and again, looking at this reference, you can see that this part of the tree is out of focus, that part of the tree is out of focus, and everything behind this branch is completely kind of gone. So whenever you're photographing nature or an animal like this, generally you're far away. Generally you're using a telephoto lens. Kind of squashes the space down a little bit, and you're not going to get a lot of depth of field in that. So the depth of field is going to be very shallow. So I'll buy that the branch is in focus, especially if it's like directly across and it's on the same parallel as the bird. But I wouldn't expect to see this stuff in focus. Like that feels like it's definitely behind the branch. I mean, if you're shooting this with a telephoto lens, and like even if you got like about this close on the bird, there would be a chance that you'd have to you couldn't get the front and the back half of the bird to be in focus, right? Like that's a pretty shallow depth of field. So I would just keep the value of it the same, but bring the depth of it a little closer to the camera. Yeah, and I think you're off to a good start on that one. A couple others that were submitted. Go ahead and get into Rahul's here. So in Rahul's, we can see. Let's see. Let's get into it here. So I want to start with the positive. I do like that what we're seeing or not seeing really out of the window. One of the trickiest parts about balancing these interior-exterior sets is getting that balance of how bright it is outside with how dark it is inside, or how light it is inside, I should say. And I think that you're doing a good job of a room that doesn't really have a light source. You would need to expose up about that level in order to see the interior there. So for that, I will say that you're doing a good job. Some areas of improvement. The first thing I noticed right off the bat was this wall. So we've got the bump or displacement that you're using is not lining up with the tile itself. So I see a tile square here, and then I see a bump of that square here. I also, if I'm like reading this line, you can see it's very close there, and as it goes down here, it gets further away. So you really want to watch out for that. And then some other things here. So the other things that I was seeing about this were a few things. Okay, so when I was looking at this overall, the biggest thing I wasn't seeing was a sense of kind of like the mood and the directing the viewer's eye. So it all feels very sterile to me. It just feels like we're just lighting a room. We're not trying to tell a story. We're not trying to create a mood in our audience. We're not trying to really get them to look at anything particular in the space. And that's a real missed opportunity. Oh, another thing about this wall was watch out, like this bump is really large for the scale, and it makes the room feel a little bit miniature. And it's also like, I'm not quite sure what that bump is meant to replicate. It just is tactile for tactile sake. And then the other one is just this like bright line on this cushion there. It's very, very bright. Oh, last one. And then on these cabinets here, I'm getting like this same dark shape. kind of repeated. Watch out for that. And then on these cabinets here, on these drawers, you can see that the wood grain is vertical. This is just me nerding out. For those, the wood grain would actually be horizontal. So just something to be aware of there. But yeah, in terms of directing the viewer's eye, getting us to focus on the scene, I feel like I don't really know where to look. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be looking at. So if it's like, if you're trying to tell a story of like a couple that just broke up and there's like this remnants of this wine bottle, let's really get the focus in on this area here. Let's create more vignetting, really kind of, brighten up this area, really kind of sell that space. In terms of the mood, like, is this a warm kitchen? Like, this definitely doesn't feel like a kitchen that people live in. There's nothing really on the counters. There's no toasters. There's no appliances. There's no dirty dishes. Everything's very kind of pristine. This reflection of this counter it almost feels like there's a plastic sheen over everything. It's like this kitchen's never ever been used. And then like this fruit feels plastic to me. Like there's no subsurface to it. It's very specular. So there's something like, and you can play off of that. I mean, you can play off this whole idea of a very cold, weird, sinister kitchen because we have this weird camera angle up in the corner. It's like a security camera. We're actually seeing on top of the fan. And also I want to point out this too. It doesn't feel like there's a ceiling on this set because I can see a lot of light here on top. And what I would expect is there's not a lot of room here between the ceiling and the fan itself, so I'd expect there to be like a rim there and then all of this to be very dark. So just another thought there. So I'd really like to see you kind of dial in. Like, what story do you want to tell? What do you really want to get out of this scene? And push it a little bit further because you have some good basis here. You have a good start. It's just I really want to, like, if I saw this on a demo reel, I'd be like, okay, that's fine. And then like there's not that much technically wrong with it. It's just not. I wouldn't hire someone to do this for a movie because it's not selling it quite enough. But you're getting there, so I think you're on the right path. So we'll talk about Jordan's submissions next. So Jordan has 2 of them here. So we've got this scene. It's a bunch of mechanics. I think it's again a really great start, but I think there are some missed opportunities here. So I'm looking at this and there's a lot going on, tons of light in here. There's and even when they're not light sources, there's like little specks bouncing up here, like little bright areas that my eye kind of pings around to. And I think the story that we're trying to tell is really focusing in on these kind of 4 areas, right? These 4 groups or individuals that are working. And it may even just be these 3. Like, I'll let you decide that. But the way that we want to do this is, if that's the case, and if I'm reading that right, the way that we want to do is we really want to push that. And we want to push that by making those the main pockets of light that center our focus. So I would turn off this light and allow some of this center area to go a little bit darker. And I would also really focus on the color. So right now the lights are fairly neutral. Like, these are pretty cool. And you can play that up by making these lights much warmer and make the room feel a little bit warmer overall, and then allow these cool punches to pop through. Additionally, these look more like fluorescent lights. So if it was me, I would consider making those more greenish and make it feel more laboratory-ish. And then either allow these lights to stay this kind of cool blue color or allow them to get warm like tungsten light and really create some warm pockets in there to make things pop. In terms of the light value, I think we've got some room to play with there. So I really like what we're seeing here. I like this haze here. This one feels too dim. And again, that just depends on how much you want to play it up. If, because it's bright here, but I'm not seeing it really anywhere on him. You can push that a little bit more the same way that I would see it here. But overall, I think this is got a lot of detail. There's a lot of good shader work that's going on in there. I just think we can create some stronger pockets of light and really kind of focus things in. So that would be my advice there for your shot here. So I got some more clarity on this in the in the live session. So I thought this was like on a spaceship because that's the other image that I saw. And I think it's like in a donut case was the description that I heard. So with that in mind, there are a few things about this that I'm not fully buying in. Basically, I'm not being sold on the scale that he might be a miniature in a donut case. Because if that's the case and we're this close to him, this stuff would just be absolutely obliterated by depth of field. Like we would see none of it. It would just be super blurry. If that's not the case, I'll go ahead and comment on the lighting so that we can create some more dynamicism here. So dynamicism is not a word, by the way. I just made that up. So the biggest thing, again, let's go back. Mood, shaping, and directing the viewer's eye. So in terms of mood, there's just kind of like a general overall top-down light without any real color to it. It's very neutral. So it's a very sterile setting. There's not like a lot of mood I can generate from this. This device that he's holding in his hand, is it dangerous? Is he happy about it? Is he leery of it? Like what's going on here? What is he even looking at with it? Are these lights lighting up? Is there something glowing out of here onto his face? Like there's a lot of question marks. So that's where I would be with the mood, is to really figure out what is this character scared? Is he happy? Has he been trying to get to this donut thing for a while? Like what mood are we really trying to sell here? Number 2, let's talk about some visual shaping. So generally speaking, because we've got this overall light going on, we're not seeing a lot of shaping on him. He's very, like his tone and his levels are very consistent across his body, across his face. It seems like there's some top-down lighting because I can see some more brightness there, but not a lot of visual shaping going on there, especially in the eyes. The eyes feel very bright, except for the pupil and iris area. Those feel very dark, so I'm not really getting a good sense of what eye color he has. So I think that we can do a lot more in terms of shaping. Figure out a key direction, really get some good light wrapping around the character and really some good light to dark fall off areas. In terms of directing the viewer's eye, there is some more saturation on the character than there is on the background, and I think the depth of field will help that out a lot. The depth of field blur will make the character pop forward a little bit. But I think that there's more that we can do. It looks like there's going to be some centering of some light here. So, maybe there's like a pocket of light here or something that we can play with and allow this other stuff to go kind of darker so we can really focus in on here. And maybe, like I said, maybe there's light coming out of this and kind of shining up on his face or something here that we can get in the reflection of his eyes so we can really kind of connect that all together. So I do think that there's some good potential here and a good chance to really create some cool lighting there. The last of the actual lighting critiques that we're going to do today was Rgb. So this one's a little bit different. These product spots are a little bit, they're a little funny because you are at the mercy of the client so much. I mean, you are in anything that you do. Your client could be the director. If you're working on a commercial, it could be the product. Some things that I've learned about these types of product spots is that the client is generally very concerned about a few things. One, the color of their product needs to be right, especially on something like lipstick. A couple other things, you want to read their logo, you want to read their wording, and so you want to make sure you do all that stuff. In terms of the lighting on this, I'm feeling like these white areas on the side, these kind of the cards that you're using to get that shaping on there, it's very smart and you're doing the right thing. B, I think it's a little bit too much. I think we can soften that a little bit. Maybe not as much on the base, but definitely on the lipstick itself, because these are like these types of hard rim edges makes the product feel very metallic or like a hard plastic. And this is lipstick, and like I can see it here too. And as lipstick, you want it to be softer. You want it to be something a client would want to put to their lip. So you don't want it to be super hard edged like that. I would add a subsurface scattering shader to the lipstick itself to kind of diffuse that edge up a little bit. The other thing about the framing of this, and again, totally up to the client, but I would back it away from that corner. Because what's happening is when you get like something this close together, it starts to create some visual energy. Like when you look at it, it just feels like there's tension building there. It's very similar to like the Sistine Chapel and what Michelangelo painted with God and David. Was it Adam? Adam, yes, Adam and God about to touch fingers, and you can feel this kind of like connect, like this potential energy there, like building. And I think that's something that you want to be aware of and definitely avoid when you're not trying to generate that energy. And then in terms of like it being lit over black, just I always like to have a little variation in the background, just like a little gradient or something could help. But again, totally up to the client there. And but those are just some little tips there for you. So on top of that, I just wanted to show off a couple other things that some TDU students are working on in our student section. Those that are enrolled in the Lighting for Animation bundle. We've got Sylvain is updating the girl in the mushroom, and I think he's really doing a really, really beautiful job. One of the things I stressed with the critiques on this challenge was getting the girl to connect to this space, and I think he's doing a really beautiful job. And we pushed to get some more warm light on the bunny there. Francesco, our friend from DreamWorks, helped out too with some critiques in the student area about getting some pockets of fog in there and really kind of like stepping back in the space. And when I talk about like aerial perspective, getting the black points to line up, so you're looking like the darkest blacks are in the foreground, and then as we step back, they get lighter and lighter, and we just are able to get some more fog, some less contrast, less saturation as we're going back into space. Just the volumetric, the fog, this little specular, and this like those values and that shaping in there is looking just really, really, really nice. So I want to say good job, Sylvain, on that. And then Hisham's also working on something very cool. We've got this scene with some really cool reference that he's got coming in. So a lot of shaping, a lot to build on there. And then the last one is Nicholas, whose depth is really... so as you guys know, we work with Anim School to get their animation from... We work with some of their students where... and their founder, Dave Gallagher, has allowed some of their students to come over to the Academy of Animated Art to just drop in some of their animation to give our students some animated scenes to light. So this is one that Nicholas is working on. And totally work in progress, so I'm not going to give lighting notes, but I do want to draw attention to some of the detail that he's really, really added to the scene. We got some detail shots here. So we've got just like the clutter and all the additional set pieces that he's added. Like looking at this overall set, I just love the amount of clutter we're seeing in some of these areas. Like over here, even in the shadow here, really, really nice stuff. I told him that we could add some more to the walls and get those going. But overall, I think this is looking really, really dynamic and definitely having some potential. And even in this early iteration, I wanted to point out how nice the hair was looking. Like, look at that, how you can feel the specular highlights kind of rolling off in the hair and just creating shaping in there. Getting some subsurface on there. You can feel the texture of the sweater. Nick's doing some additional work. Nicholas is doing some additional work on the eyes to get the eyes to read up a little better in the geometry and the lighting. So this has got a lot of really cool potential, and I'm really excited where this goes. So that's what we got going overall. Again, the lighting challenge, we've extended the date to the 31st of May, so you have some time. Keep posting your imagery. I will do these live critiques every Friday. And then when the recordings don't work, I will re-record them, I guess, and post them again. So if you all have any questions, please let me know, and feel free to post anything into the forum. I will try and check as often as I can. And the biggest thing, and I will keep repeating this, is please stay safe, everybody out there. Pandemic is still strong, but we're stronger, and we're going to get through this, and we are here for you and whatever you guys need. So keep going, and I can't wait to see what beautiful things you guys create with the Blade Runner scene. So happy lighting, everyone.